And then when countdown ends, you can go ahead and hit that key there, Elliot. Welcome, everyone, to the Kindly Ops Talk Show, a show about technology and helping people work together. We do this live every Monday and Friday at 12 p.m. Pacific Time. Mondays are generally focused on developing technology, and Fridays we focus on people working together. If you're new to the show, we welcome you. Feel free to submit any questions in the question box where you can vote up questions that you really want to have answered by our panelists live. And today we're going to be talking about a particularly hot topic: avoiding burnout while working from home. We know that everyone's working from home now, or a majority of people are working from home. Sharing your stories, your strategies, your ideas on how to have that balance between your personal life and your work life when they inhabit the same space. So first, I'd like to start off and really kind of ask our panelists here, like, who'd feel comfortable sharing a story when they're just completely burnt out, where you just couldn't take it anymore. You had to walk away, get out of your space, get out of your place, and take some time to reset. I know that there's been some circumstances in there for me personally where so much time was spent on one project in one place, and it was really the wrong environment for me to be working on that particular project at the time. Sometimes the couch sounds comfortable, but it's not so great. I know me and Elliot had a conversation about that before. Why don't you share that, Elliot? Kind of even, it doesn't ever necessarily have to be a story about a specific instance, but like maybe even just a best practice that you've learned over time to be just like, I cannot work, I cannot be productive in this environment.
Yes. So hiring people on distributed teams, on remote teams, I've done that for a long time, and there's kind of there's two opposite ends of the pendulum. One is like, oh, how do you make sure people are being productive and they're actually working when they're supposed to be working? Um, I think that's actually a very tiny, simple problem. It's obvious if somebody's not doing work. Um, the other thing that most people don't talk about that is way harder is you have somebody who is motivated and they're working all the time and they never feel like they can stop working. And then you introduce time zone and it's even more so because like I've been working for 10 hours, but somebody else like it was only halfway through their day. And so like now it's 16 hours that I've been looking at chat and trying to respond quickly and so on. Um, so a thing that I've been looking for when interviewing people for a long time is they're motivated, they're smart, they know how to do the job, but do they have something else in their life that is going to actually drag them away from the computer, that is going to force them to leave? It could be music lessons. A dog is great. Kids are great if you have enough kids around. Like they've got to go places. You need some obligation in your life to actually drag you away from that computer, and you got to find what that is. So like I've signed up for weird classes just to have something that actually forces me to leave. Like, oh, it's 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock or 7 o'clock. I have to go to this place to show up on time because I'm willing to keep a commitment to other people and show up on time. But it's so much harder to keep that commitment to myself of like, oh, I need to stop working because like I was only going to work for 8 hours today or 10 hours today, whatever I set. It's so much harder to keep that promise to myself to stop at the end. But if I've made a promise to somebody else to show up, that actually like it's not easy, but like it does drag me away from the computer and cause that new scene.
That's fair. Yeah, good point, Kevin.
Yeah, I definitely relate to Elliot in regards to that. I've had to, when I first started working remotely, I had to make sure I kept a routine that you may see come organically from your traditional brick and mortar job. When you leave the office, the location, you're done. You're no longer available. So I had to establish some boundaries with either coworkers or clients to say, at my time where I virtually indicate I'm unavailable, I really mean it. Because if you start giving into that, then it just creates a kind of a domino effect, and they know that they can reach you. Another thing that although I love the flexibility of laptops, it really helped to start working in an office at home and have the PC set up, because it's kind of bolted to that office location. As you alluded to, you could take the laptop on the couch or in the bedroom. So that messed up my mindset of, okay, the bedroom's not for work, it's for sleeping, or but the laptop was able to move around. But now with the PC desktop, I at least have a little advantage of not going into the office, because that's what works for.
Oh, that's really nice. We'll have Dan, and then we'll have Lauren.
Yeah, I've got a lot of years of working remotely too, but in very different types of jobs. So it's not a one size fits all conversation. You probably do a good full season of podcasting about all the different angles of this, the business, the company experience, the managers, the employees, the customers, how they're all impacted by remote working. But trying to narrow it in here, I've worked at a very regimented 8 to 5, clock in, clock out. You've got KPIs and metrics. You're on a schedule. It's awesome. When you work in the office, all you want to do is go home. But once you start working at home, at the end of the day, man, I got to get out of here. So I'm off to the gym, go to a cafe and sit and study. I learned another language, doing that because working remotely benefited me in that way. Now, putting in the wrinkle of the pandemic, it's not as easy at the end of the workday to go out and do those things. So for people that are new to working remotely and they're like, hey, this just doesn't seem like it's cracked up to be, just wait and see. Once some things change up here, it may be an entirely different experience. So if you're already feeling burned out, or you were already working remotely and it was great, but now it's not so great because you feel even more confined, just hang in there and don't assume that it's not going to adjust. Now, more project related jobs that aren't on a clock, and it's not just KPIs and metrics all day that you're mindlessly trying to hit, that's where you really get in trouble for me, because you find yourself at burned out. I guess the worst part is you don't know it yet, and it's just you realize that I've been staring at this monitor for 8 hours and I haven't done anything. So that's the thing. You may need a buddy system to kind of create accountability, not necessarily a manager micromanaging you, because who wants that, but you may have to build in something for yourself if that's your tendency of, like, if you've got another collaborator to be like, hey, check on me if you haven't heard from me in a few hours or something. You've got to find a way to make sure you're not locked in a death stare on that monitor.
For sure. Lauren?
Well, about a year and a half ago, I was, going along with what Elliot says, just having to take a step back, but sometimes it's inadvertent things that take you away. I had just gotten off a call with Elliot, hit end meeting, and my fire alarm started going off. And I had flooded our 3rd floor apartment and all of the apartments below us.
Oh, no.
And it took days. And I had just gotten off saying, I know the problem. I figured it out. And it was great. And I was so motivated to fix that issue. And then that happened. And by the time I cleaned up the apartment, apologized to everybody else, and contacted the landlord, having to walk back into my office/living room and see that computer and say, I don't remember how to fix that issue anymore. And so it's the little things in life, the part-time schedule, that can cause this burnout of, I don't want to get back on the computer and I don't want to face this issue because I just don't remember it anymore. And, having to kind of come back to that. And that can cause just kind of the burnout of just not wanting to kind of pick that back up.
Oh, that's an awesome experience. Thank you for sharing that. We'll have Neil and then get Kevin.
Yeah, it was interesting what Dan said there about how this could be a podcast series of its own. We as project managers in the company that I work for, we had a discipline meeting had put a cap on how many times we would use burnout as the theme for our discussions, because we weren't touching on other stuff. There's just so many things about it, and it exists in so many ways for our teams that it was hard to move on to other subjects that were good for our discipline discussion. But the other thing that's I found in my own personal experience with myself and my teams have been that you rarely are the one that says, hey, I'm burned out. It needs to be pointed out to you. And the same for my team as well. It's I'm the person that comes to you and says, I think I'm burnt out. It has to be pointed out to people, because it feels like a weakness to say, hey, I think I'm burnt out. It feels like it's a failure. But that's a really important part of it that I've learned, that you need someone to kind of help you with it and help you with the accountability, and also need to look out for other people.
That's super valid. Kevin?
Is that me? Sorry. I forgot.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, we'll circle back to you. Sorry, I'll start using the last name as well with you guys. Let's do Whitney and then Sam.
Yeah, I was just thinking from my own experience, running my business, I'm constantly checking in on the people to see if they're burnt out, or what could I put in place or take off of their plate, so that they don't become burnt out and resentful of what they're doing. And I find that I'm checking in probably a few times a week, not just like once a month, just with my staff to see like, okay, like what are the hiccups? How much time are you putting here? Like, and if I message you in Discord, please, like, feel free to not have to respond right away, because that like continuous conversation itself can feel like you can never leave work at the door when you are working remotely. So that's been like a huge thing for me, is just remembering to like that everyone has permission to not respond at certain times, and setting that as like the boundary. That helps a lot.
Nice. Sam?
For me, I have experienced no burnout since I started to work from home, and it just makes me so happy to be working from home. But recently, I've had a big difficulty come up with, I'm implementing a new system at work, which is something, what it's to do with is something I'm not experienced with. It's not a part of my normal job description, but not having the people that I need to be in contact with about it close by, and having a really big gap in the communication. Most of it needs to be done over email, and that is just way too slow to be able to solve those problems. And that's the first time that I've come not close to burnout necessarily, but just to a big roadblock in what I'm trying to get done. And I was listening to on a side note, then I was listening to a Two Bobs podcast the other day, where they had a motivational speaker on there. I wish I remembered his name, but he was saying that people are going to end up really regretting not taking time off during this thing. And it seems like there's this kind of message right now for companies where it's, on a corporate level, there is kind of a viewpoint of, why would people take time off right now? We're in the trenches with it, and this is a difficult time. Whether that's objectively true or not is another thing, but that what we may end up seeing is that once, or if things do start to change a little bit, at least after some certain amount of time, like people might be getting more burned out because they're not giving themselves the actual at-home time as opposed to at-home and working time.
That's really super valuable. I think something that continues to keep coming up, and because I think we've reached that point, right? Like we've, with everything, with the situation of people that perhaps had to switch to remote working. That was maybe back in March, maybe back in April, maybe even May for some companies. But that's been almost now 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. As time goes on, that I think we're going to see that more and more, and I think that's something that's definitely will be important to address. Well, maybe we can then. You kind of mentioned you're kind of having an issue in dealing with communication on that new project, but maybe we can kind of switch to or pivot to discussing maybe what strategies that you have used that are valuable in working remotely, and kind of trying to keep things in a relative realm of balance. And it could be even things that help you to do so, that maybe quicken the communication between you and your team, so that you can just allocate time to other things. We'll start with Elliot.
Yeah, so particularly with a distributed team, and especially if there's any difference in time zones, one thing that I like to do is make sure everybody has two things to work on. It should be a hard thing and an easy thing. It should be the thing that's a high priority and a thing that's a low priority. And so, of course, you're trying to get the hard thing, that's a high priority thing, done. But anytime you've got one of those, you've got a slump in motivation, you're having a hard time coming up to speed for the day, you're waiting on a response from somebody else, having the easy thing there really helps, right? So you're like, okay, I'm going to work on the easy thing. I got a couple of wins there. I made some progress. I'm starting to feel a sense of accomplishment. I'm going to switch back to the hard thing. Or it's after lunch. I still haven't heard back about this important project. I have something that I can keep making progress on and not just feel totally stuck. So you don't want people to have 5 things to work on and be like context switching and like really stressed out. But 2 things to work on is a trick that I've been using.
I really like that. Let's do Whitney, and then we'll have Sam.
One thing that I have been trying to implement myself is taking 5-minute breaks in between tasks. So Kevin was telling me about a new method, and I apologize, I cannot remember the name of it, but doing 20 minutes of work and then taking a 5-minute break. And so for myself, I thought, I'm just going to buy the Headspace app. And I did. And that's what I've been doing, is just like trying to put Headspace in those 5-minute breaks before then I switch. But just having like a running list of to-do things or themed tasks or whatever, I'll do those in like themed blocks and then take a break. And that has helped me a lot. Kevin's got it pulled up what that method is. But that has been helping me a ton, because I'm the type of person that won't eat or go to the bathroom or anything because I'm honed in on the computer. And then like Frankie, the dog's been bothering me to like get outside, but I'm still stuck on this one task. And I feel like my little brain is just going to think of something else if I try and switch from that. So just going through that process has helped me a lot, just to be a healthier person too, to make sure that I'm keeping hydrated and I'm eating meals and all of that stuff. And that's something I've been recommending to other people too, is just switch up your environment, do these little micro tasks. It helps you feel a lot of success, because you can just be stuck on one thing for so many hours thinking you're getting nowhere when you have accomplished all these things. But if you haven't ticked off the boxes in a way you can see them, you're going to feel like you did nothing the whole day.
Oh yeah.
Who else has filled out a checklist of stuff that's already done, just so that they can see that the checklist is done?
For sure, yeah, and that time to focus too, like giving yourself time to focus, but then also time to like, okay, I can do actually nothing if I want to for the next 5 or 10 minutes.
You got to think of the Office episode where Michael Scott starts the Michael Scott Paper Company, and Pam's like, "What did you do today?" "Made a huge breakfast." Cross that off.
Definitely, I like it. Sam?
The Pomodoro technique that they were just referring to is, I've known that as focus sprinting, and it's something that I've found really beneficial for myself as well. In line, actually, sorry, the main thing I've found helpful with it is that when I do take a break, I don't feel guilty about it, because a lot of the time when I move myself away from the computer during the day to have lunch or something like that, I feel like I've got to have my phone on me, just in case someone calls me and that sort of thing. But by implementing that sort of focus strategy and just switching off during that from other communication, you feel way better when you actually do take a break, which is more regularly, and you end up getting more done. And with what Elliot mentioned as well, he talked about having a high priority task and a low priority task. That personally, what most of what I'm working on is creative work. And when you're doing something like that, you are allowing for incubation to exist, as incubation as a part of the creative process. And it's a really underrated part of the creative process and creative problem solving effectively. So yeah, that's something that for myself really try and think about as well, of just, okay, I'm just going to not touch that for a while, take my brain away from it, do this other thing. And then when I come back to it, I usually have an answer to it. And with communication in general that you had initially asked about, I struggle in an office because I enjoy talking to people. I really enjoy talking to the majority of my coworkers in the office, and someone comes by my desk, we're chatting, and it's so disruptive for my day. It has been since when I was in school. And so the communication aspect of things for my company, at least, has been a lot more compartmentalized, and the communication that I have with people is more personal, where, you know, occasionally we'll give each other a phone call to shoot the breeze or whatever, and it about work, and it's just kind of filtering everything out. But personally, I've found that change in communication to be really beneficial, and essentially you call up, or even meetings are existing because they are about this thing. And so it kind of makes it more efficient, but you have to allow for that incubation as well.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Elliot?
So one of the techniques that I use to fight burnout is to introduce more stress into my life. And so what that really is about is, like, similar to what Sam was talking about. A lot of the things that I'm working on as a business owner, and just the nature of the work that I do, are creative or strategic, or problems that aren't going to be solved in a day or a week or a month. And so they are there all the time. And even though I say, like, yeah, work on two things, I can make sure, like, those are my top two things. I can, like, try and make sure I'm away from my desk. If I'm doing anything that it is a low cognitive burden, a nice walk in the park, eating a nice meal, sitting on the couch, anything pleasant, laying in bed, trying to go to sleep, my mind is off, like, trying to solve those things, and it will not give me any peace. I'm still, like, fretting and fretting and fretting and fretting and fretting. And so I have slowly realized over time, like, oh, the times when I feel mentally refreshed are when I was doing something for recreation that actually had an element of danger, that required, like, part of my brain to actually pay attention and stop trying to problem solve in the background. And so riding a bike isn't quite dangerous enough when I was on a boat. Like, when I had a boat, like, I had to pay complete attention to the boat or somebody was going to get hurt. And I would be so refreshed from that because it was just dangerous enough. Same with scuba diving. And now it's riding a one wheel, right? Like, I wrecked my ankle last summer falling off of it, but I feel so refreshed when I go ride that thing down to the beach. I almost fall off 2 or 3 times, and it is like, it requires me to be in the moment and stop fretting about work. And that helps me with a mental reset so much. It's probably not a healthy thing, but, like, I need a little bit of danger to get my mind to let go of the problem solving.
Oh, that's actually a technique I've used too. It's like forced mental refocusing. And, it's like going out. For me, I was going out on a motorcycle and just going out on a ride for, as long as I could possibly get away for, coming back feeling like not just like I'm starting over again, but feeling renewed to be able to, okay, I can tackle this now, and it's safe, and I can work on this for another block of time. Dan?
And for those of us that don't live quite the life of danger of Elliot and Miles, I do something similar, surprise, surprise, with coffee. Instead of going and just using your regular drip automatic coffee maker or whatever, do your hand pour over. Learn how to make it 6 different ways, different toys that you can do, because each one has different steps, different process that you have to remember and think through, that do, in a safer way, require a focus. That water can burn you, though. But yeah, so it's kind of a similar concept. Something that actually requires enough focus that you're setting aside the problem so that you don't wind up in this, in that burnout. And then to the other points also, just it kind of helps your mind get kind of reset, so you can see the difference between whether you're busy or whether you're productive, because it's really easy to be busy and not productive.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, and there, especially staying inside, staying indoors. I know I've had to rethink some of my strategies too, for sure. And I like that one, making some pour over coffee. Whitney.
Yeah, that's what I call building in rituals to your day so that you have those like grounding, reset, and you're not in this like hypervigilant state. Like I deal with PTSD, and so I'm constantly in this hypervigilant state, and it makes me really good at what I do because I can problem solve and my brain is constantly working on that. But I personally won't digest food or anything because my whole immune system, everything, nervous system is focused on working. And so it is so important to build in these rituals to ground yourself throughout the day. Else your physical health will be really affected long term if you don't, start that as your foundation of getting a really good schedule and figuring out what's best for you and your health and mental health too.
Oh, I like that, Elliot. Could we maybe drop a link in that in the chat box for that as well? Very cool. So definitely requires not just choosing different strategies, but also figuring out what works best for you and for your situation in your house and in your space. But maybe now we've kind of talked about what we do personally. How do you feel that companies can do maybe a better job of this, especially companies maybe that are like newly transitioning? They have all this people that are working from home now. Maybe they've gotten certain logistical things set up, but really haven't thought about what this kind of culture that they're creating will be for the long term, next 60, 90 days, year, however long that might be. What are some things that you've seen maybe in companies that have worked great, or something that you think that that needs to happen? Elliot?
So you have to be explicit about creating or recreating the set of norms that the team is going to use. There's a book here, Organizational Patterns of Agile Software Development. An older book, maybe 15 years ago. It takes an anthropological approach. It says that it's about software development. It's really not about software development. It's about any type of knowledge work, any business owner, any white collar work, anybody who is able to work from home. It's about that. And that shows a bunch of organizational patterns. So that is a great place if you're a manager to like get some ideas. The other book I was showing was Rituals for Work. That's a much newer book from last year. Really, really simple rituals, but all of those things are about just defining what the norms are. And so the simplest example I can think is using the chat room, right? Whether you're using Slack or Discord or Teams or whatever else, you have to be very, very deliberate about what are the expectations around this. So giving people permission to put themselves in like do not disturb mode, giving people permission to block out focus periods on their calendar, or explaining like, hey, you shouldn't go private message every single question. You should ask the question in the shared channel because 3 other people have the same question but didn't know how to express it yet. And just so you have to be really, really slow and careful and deliberate about resetting what the norms are that people just show up with because everybody feels nervous. And then once you get everybody on the same page, you can start improving those over time. But you have to make sure anytime somebody comes in the team, you like retrain them on like, here's how we're communicating. And like, it's okay that if you asked a question in the Slack channel and you didn't at somebody, nobody got back to you for 3 hours because they were working. And if you need a timely response, like here's what you do to make sure like, oh, I need an answer. And say like, hey, this is something I'm working on for tomorrow. Does anybody know how to do this? Versus I'm stuck on a customer support call right now. Can you get back to me with the password as soon as possible, please? Just like being much more explicit about that communication makes it so much easier for people.
Oh, that's awesome, Sam. And then we'll have Dan.
The whole topic of what companies should do about the future of this is just something that I love because there's just so many problems with the way that things are. And companies need to think about how they can support work-life balance and providing those options for people as far as working from home in the future is a really good way of doing that. So hybrid offices, as far as hybrid days that you can be there if you need to be, and that sort of thing. But then you don't have to be in the office those other days is something that's really great. Even having the concept of core hours as well, where from 10 to 2, you're reachable for communication, but that gives support to people who are not morning people, they are night people, and just those people are just, they need to sleep in till late, but they're going to be able to get so much more done if you let them work in the afternoon, sort of thing. And for myself, I'm a morning person, and so it's been great that I'm not dictated, you must be here at 9, and there is zero incentive for you to come in early, or I just get started when I want to. And there's been a lot of the mindset with offices has been the same for a long time, and essentially the core principles are based around what came from the manufacturing industry. And it's just these hours are when the machines are running, and this is when a human needs to be sitting there. But if you do change that mindset and have more of a dynamic productivity mindset, then you're going to survive better as a company. And even if everybody can go back to the office, you're going to survive better as well. When somebody is sick, like I've had a lot of times when, I've just had a cold, it's not affecting how I work, but I don't want to go in and make people sick. And in the US, with their wonderful sick time laws, it's like I'm sacrificing a lot by taking a sick day when I could just be working at home. So it's really a future-proofing survival thing for companies to do that. And what I love personally about my situation having changed is that the metrics of what constitutes success in my role has changed. I still don't have proper actual KPIs, but it's based now on output, not on attendance. So the thought process for management has gone from, great, I can see that you're at work, to great, I can see that you're getting work done. And it's really rewarding. And I'm really glad that this shift is happening.
Yeah, that'll be definitely a key change in the workplace. We'll have Dan and then Neil.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited to see how it all unfolds. Obviously it's tough circumstances under which it's pushing this forward, but I worked years ago in a company that was piloting letting people work from home, and they had very, very strict, kind of uptight rules about it. So to the point that they didn't even want customers, that you're interacting with, to know that you work from home. It was kind of like, ooh, it's seedy. We don't want people to know that, that we let people work from home. I'm like, what? You should be shouting from the mountaintop, we're a progressive company that lets people work from home, right? But they don't see it that way. So now some that have been on the fence, just guessing, would it be good? Would it be bad? They don't have to guess now if they've been forced into this situation where they have some real examples, real data, feedback to realize, hey, this actually would work. And what that, the dominoes that fall from there. Do we need this much square footage? And, on and on and on. Again, the podcast series, you could do a season on that. So I think that's great. But then what do they do about it? You got to think about, how are you managing people before? And if, like offices I've worked in, I could go in, do my work all day long, never see the manager, be totally fine, an email here and there, and they were happy. But as soon as you work from home, now that they can't just walk around, not that they ever did, but they could, now they're like on you, like, hey, are you working? Aren't you working? So they might implement keystroke software to prove that you're working all day, or different things. So I guess I would encourage the employer to let's think about this. Did I trust my employees before and they did a good job for me? Can we give them credit that they still care about who they are and the work that they do, and let the results kind of lead the conversations on how tight you have to manage the situations, things like that. That's where I see, some crazy, overreactions to the work at home life.
Yeah, for sure. I've seen that too, and I know that you've seen inside a lot of offices as a consultant, so you can see probably the big shifts in culture that's brought about by those things. I'll have Neil, and then we'll have Elliot.
Yeah, I'm quite fortunate to work for a company that has been 100% remote for the last nearly 10 years now. The company have been 100% remote. So we've hit this quite a lot with our teams over the years. When the pandemic hit, it did, but we didn't have as such a drastic of a shift, which was quite fortunate. But things that we have leaned on a lot over the years is we are an agile environment as well, like Elliot was talking about, and the fact that I tend to ship quite often. That brings a lot of joy to engineers specifically. If they can see their work out there quickly and in an efficient manner, that keeps me happy. And there's a concept there that doesn't just have to be, like Elliot said, doesn't have to be in software development. You can put some of those practices into place in other areas as well. Being able to bite off small chunks of work and be able to get them out the door to please customers or whatever the application is, really helps with your team to keep them lit and keep them happy. Another just side point to that we've always looked out for as well is the difference between burnout and just hustling for a few weeks. Sometimes you have to work hard. Sometimes you do have to put in, like, working burning the what's the phrase? Forgotten the phrase now. Burning the midnight oil. You do have to sometimes put in an all-nighter to get something done. Is that burnout, or are you just tired from just working hard to get to a goal? The thing we look out for is that unbalance. Are you carrying that unbalance for week after week after week? That's when it becomes something that is burnout and not sustainable. And that's when we try to get involved and try and help shift that around.
That's awesome. Let's do Elliot and then Whitney.
And we're talking about, like, what should companies do, which can be, like, feel deceptively far away. What companies do is what each person does in the company. So, like, as a person in a company, what should you be doing for the employees or managers at that company, like you? And so I want to talk about deliberate and measured conflict of challenging somebody's behavior and saying that it needs to change. And so I've done this for people reporting to me, and I've done this for managers that I was reporting to. So someone goes on vacation and they're still connecting in, they're still answering emails, they're still doing whatever. They're supposed to be with their family, they're supposed to be recharging. And so that requires a very, like, you need to be kind about it, but you need to specifically challenge their behavior and tell them that that's not okay. Hey, boss, it seems like you're still answering emails. You're modeling, bad behavior for the rest of the team, and you're creating unrealistic expectations. Would it help if we disabled your email account until you came back from or your Slack account, right, until you came back from your vacation? Like, or are you going to take care of this? And so that's not a comfortable conversation, but it is a very helpful conversation. Going the other direction with an employee and with their ability to set boundaries with their own families. A lot of people are struggling with this, even more so now. But sometimes it's not about being more understanding. It's not about being nicer. They are not living up to their responsibilities at work and getting things done because they're taking 1,000 breaks during the day, or their family is asking them to do an unfair amount of stuff, deal with interruptions during the workday just because they're physically there at the house. Whereas if they were at the office, you never would have called that person to come lift that box or help with this problem. You would have waited until they got home from work. And so that's also a conversation that requires challenging somebody. I actually had to fire somebody who is an incredible engineer over it. Like, they had a new baby at home, and they had unrealistic expectations from their partner about how much they were going to take care of the baby when they were scheduled to work. Flexible schedules is one thing, but booking a time to work and then spending the whole time taking care of the baby instead of arranging proper childcare is stealing from the company. Firing that person improved their life dramatically because it forced a reset, a renegotiation with their family. And they had to come to terms, like, you got fired because of my hangups over childcare. And so in the next job, how are we going to, like, plan for this better and actually make it so you can show up at work when you're scheduled to be at work? They actually went to work in an office instead of working from home, and we're incredibly happier. We actually have a great relationship now after they went to their next company, because like that was what was at the core of that dysfunctional work environment for them, was like they needed to renegotiate those boundaries. So sometimes the thing that you can do to help other people at your company is to call out dysfunctional behavior when you see it, and try to do it in a constructive way, but be clear, like you're crossing a boundary here and this isn't healthy.
Oh, that's really good. Whitney?
I love that so much. That's for myself, when I'm managing people, I might be really good at telling them to take breaks, to take care of themselves, but I'm usually taking what I've taken off their plate and putting it onto mine. And so, yeah, Elliot understands this. You want to be like a really good manager, because you understand like management is supporting people. It's not just like telling people go do this for me. It's like you're trying to nourish like the best qualities in a person. So you want to make sure that their schedule is set up for them. But then sometimes you shoot yourself in the foot if you are taking everything off their plate and putting it on yours. So having that like very clear almost rules of just like, hey, like these are my weaknesses and I really need help in this area. So you're really good at that. Could you please call me out if you see me doing this? And so one of the people that I work closely with that's remote, she's in Seattle, we use Discord and we check in every few days, or like she'll tell me like, you don't need to respond to this, or like, hey, like this is, you shouldn't be working. Like she'll just fully out say like, you need to actually go to bed now. And that helps us both keep in line of like, okay, so the expectation is we're not always working. We have days off, but we can have the information that we need to get across be put in a safe place that we can see later. Because I think a lot of us, when we're working remotely, panic that we need to get the information off of our plate into like the proper place so that the people hear it. But if they're not available, you don't want to be imposing on them all the time. So if you're setting that example, then people will respect your space and your time too.
Yeah, that's really key, especially if you personally, maybe you haven't done that great job of communication and you personally took on a lot and you worked really, really hard and you did this thing, you dump it out there and then get nothing. That can like create like really over time a negative work environment for sure, and a negative headspace, especially when trying to navigate personal obligations and work obligations. Kevin Smith?
Yeah, one thing I've always enjoyed about these conversations that you all have had is the encouragement of kind of leaning into technology that will help with the entire remote workflow. I think businesses would benefit from doing that. I see a lot of software that's coming out that seems to provide a crutch to that old physical workflow. And yet it doesn't seem to add that benefit that it's a benefit to the new virtual work style. So I think if companies will just embrace certain things, whether it be cloud software versus desktop software, but then keeping reasonable, there may be some things that are still beneficial from traditional software and what have you, but because for a lot of people, cloud-based software, they don't like the subscription model. Or I remember working with a client, they enjoyed that whole being in person aspect so much, they required that you be on Skype for the full workday right in front of them. And it was just unnecessary, it felt like. And they used a remote desktop technology just to kind of, which has its benefits, but they just liked that aspect of having the desktop software on one computer, everybody's accessing it. They weren't open to kind of looking at other cloud-based solutions. So I think, again, if people lean into, in a reasonable manner, some solutions that come about from the remote workflow, they'll benefit from they'll benefit from the organic aspects of being able to work remotely. And yeah.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, it sounds like you've worked at some of those same places Dan's worked at. Sam?
when everything shifted very quickly to being at home for so many companies, it was kind of this Wild West kind of thing where everyone was trying to figure it out and didn't quite know what they were doing with it. And I kept thinking, like, when is this going to get ruined? And before long, there's remote work control programs and just different type of software that goes from being collaborative to being creepy. And one particular one that I don't want to name just had that got quite notorious because they had that feature where your webcam would take a photo every 5 minutes of you. And the other thing about that program was that you could also have a feature turned on where somebody, you connected to it all the time, a coworker can essentially just hit a button and appear in a video chat right on your screen. And their philosophy with it was, well, we want to be able to make sure that we can replicate the office environment. And thankfully, I've never worked in an office environment where somebody thinks it's okay to jump on my desk in my face. And I don't know who thought that was a good enough idea to develop software around it. But something that Austin Romansky mentioned a couple of weeks ago during one of these panels was, he said that what he tries to do is to take what works best about the office environment and put that into remote working. And this type of software is not what works best about the office environment. But if companies do have that type of thinking first about, well, what was good about the office environment, then they can develop some really great systems around that for themselves.
Oh, that's awesome. Let's get Dan and then Elliot.
Call me crazy, but I think a great way to replicate the office environment is to work in an office. But this opportunity would be so good, I think, for the ownership side, management side, to really start seeing their teams, their people as people, individual people with individual skill sets. And, depending on the type of job and organization, there's degrees of difficulty there. But I think that you can see people who are much better working remotely, and you can tease out that. And maybe now, where before they didn't have flexible schedules, you can see that if somebody's on a roll and they feel like, hey, today I'm going to keep working, keep driving this project, you can let them do that within reason. You got to have your boundaries, but and kind of let them know when they're up and when they're down and when they can give you their best. Now, that's, again, not always possible depending on the type of job and what has to be delivered on certain timeframes. But I do think there's a great way to get more out of people by having this option, the flexibility of remote work and flexible scheduling that wasn't there in a restrictive office. But if you want to replicate the office, that's easy.
Very fair. Yeah. Let's have Elliot and then we'll have Whitney.
And so if companies that are implementing surveillance programs now are setting themselves up for failure. And what that failure looks like is you've got 3 categories of employees who will stay and everybody else is going to leave. These are separate categories and people have different reasons for being in the categories, but the 3 categories are incompetent, vulnerable, and I forgot the other category. But like, you don't want to like drive away everybody who's not incompetent or vulnerable, right? And it doesn't matter if it's a type of work that is completely fungible, whether it's digging ditches or stocking shelves or checking out customers, you still really, really will get tremendously better performance from employees who are engaged and are, like Dan said, treated like people. There's a great little island chain grocery store on the islands here in Casco Bay. The owner grew the business for 20, 30 years and then sold it to the employees. So it's now an employee-owned cooperative. And you can be sure that the employee-owned cooperative is not implementing surveillance and KPI type software on themselves as they check out customers, at the grocery store. But you can be sure they actually do care about the bottom line and profitability and productivity. And so surveillance is the wrong way to go about it. You want to align people's incentives, but you don't want to implement a surveillance program.
That's a great example. Whitney?
Yeah, I had to work underneath a camera one time, and it just, even though I knew nothing was wrong and I wasn't being dishonest or anything, and I was like not stealing time or anything, it just something about it doesn't feel good. And so people, honest, if you're going to have some sort of surveillance, people need to know why they're being surveilled and be on board with it 100%, if it's for their safety or for whatever. But one of the things I was thinking about when Dan was talking was to find out what people are good at, find out, ask them what they want to do. That has been pretty like life changing, I guess, for me in managing people, is asking them, like, what are you good at and what do you want to do? Because sometimes people in the back of their head, they know, and they're like, I really want that task, but they're not, maybe they're feeling a little bit insecure, they need a little bit more training, so they won't say out loud, I would actually be really good at that. And you might be surprised what people will be good at, which they could have been in the wrong role for like a whole year, and you might be feeling like you're not getting your money's worth from them. But as soon as you switch their role, or you have that honest conversation, they do amazing and they kill it. So that's the one thing that I've been doing, is because my own business has switched from on-site, like half on-site and a little bit virtual. And so that's kind of what I've had to do, is figure out what are people good at. And then realizing too, like, my business has changed completely and it's outgrown me. So I need to find people that will take on tasks that I can't do well, that they would just be like, they could do it in their sleep.
Well, that's great, Elliot, and then we'll have Dan.
I love that example of asking people what they want to do. A story about when that happened. I had software development teams. We split one division into 5 squads. Squad has 5 or 6 people on it, and so we've got to develop new features and we've got to do bug fixing. The bug fixing is the not fun work, right? So we're going to make it fair. So 4 squads are going to work on 1 new feature each. 1 squad is going to do bug fixing. They'll go through a sprint 2 to 4 weeks, and then we'll rotate, right? And so every 4 sprints, you get a session of bug fixing. It's fair for everybody. It's going to be great, right? One team was getting burned out, and they were frustrated, and eventually we actually did an on-site, like flew everybody to the same place, and we're hanging out for a week, and it came up in conversation, like, we really don't like the feature development work. And we're like, what? That's the good stuff. Everybody likes feature development work. Like, the tedious, like, I don't want to do that. Like, the janitor work is the fixing bugs. And we're like, that's the only time we feel a sense of accomplishment. Like, would it be okay if we just fix bugs all the time? And we were just like, what? How? We never asked. We never knew. And we're like, so we talked to the other squads. Hey, what if the green squad stays on bug fixing all year long? They're like, that'd be great, but that's not fair to them. Like, no, they want to. And so it's so important to actually ask people what work they enjoy.
That's awesome. I like that example a lot too. Dan.
Yeah, those are both great, Whitney and Elliot. And thinking about that, getting the best out of people, they are still people. We're all people, and I know it's a terrible shock to some of you, but I'm not perfect, right? So I've got some flaws, and any employee might. So with surveillance and how the management, handles this remote situation, an example of surveillance that's kind of old school that comes to my mind about maybe approaching it in a different way is a story I've heard of cameras being installed way back in the early stages of putting cameras in a business, and catching an employee stealing, literally stealing money from the cash drawer, but had been in many respects a fine employee. Now, the obvious thing might seem to fire it, but the particular manager handled it by just calling the person in and saying, you know what, I need your help. There's been somebody stealing from our company, and I know I can trust you. Can you please, help me keep an eye on this situation? It never happened again. So the manager in that case chose to let it slide. Obviously, if it had kept happening, they'd have to take a different course. I'm not saying, that you can do it that way in every situation. But as for, how we manage and surveil, our employees, our teams, maybe we can be a little creative and respect the fact that they're not going to be perfect in all respects. But if I show them, hey, I trust you in so many ways, and I know I can, count on you to do their best, that positive reinforcement would actually help them self-correct some behaviors before you have, not that you're avoiding conflict, because Elliot made great points about that. Don't let things slide that need to be talked about. Have the hard conversations, but there can be some creative ways to go about it.
No, that's super valid, especially if you're dealing with the opposite, right? Instead of overwork or burning out, maybe there's someone you have that's maybe not adjusting to this work from home situation to the best of their abilities, and maybe spending a little too much time doing personal activities. Maybe the same thing would apply. Maybe have just some frank conversation with them. Say, hey, you know what? I could really use you to do this one thing. Can you handle this? Give them a task or help refocus them in that way instead of just cutting them off. Whitney?
I can't remember what I was gonna say, but one thing that I can think of is that it's the perfect opportunity with our whole world changing for people to find the right positions for them, with it be remote work or on site or whatever it is. I really feel bad for a lot of businesses that are not taking this opportunity to completely observe how everyone's functioning and put them in the right places, because it's just such an optimal time to make those changes and to observe really what's going on and make this work to your advantage, because I do believe people really do want to work from home or have like more time to themselves, and this is that perfect opportunity to figure out like the correct schedule and how you can reward people for working at home in a more flexible situation, as opposed to taking more things away from them.
Oh, that's great. And I think honestly, that's a great spot there to just pivot just a little bit. We have a few minutes left. Do you guys have any wild ideas, your maybe the work scenario that you've always dreamed of? Maybe for some of you, or I know a lot of us, it was working from home. That was the first scenario. But now that we're in that, what is an ideal situation that maybe it's far off into the future, or maybe it's not, that you would just love to have, or maybe even it's just a tool that you'd love to have to make things easier at your current workspace? Elliot?
So I've had so much flexibility working remotely for years. The thing that I dream about that I'd love to do is to develop, like I'm trying to get more disciplined about finances, because I want to work on a creative project that takes 6 months to a year without generating revenue. And so what's really tantalizing to me now is like to try and create the situation where I do have enough runway to work on those projects that are just going to take a longer period of time to develop. And so that's what I'm dreaming about.
Nice, like a self venture capital system instead of relying on. Yeah, that's really cool. I like that idea quite a bit. Dan?
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, it's an opportunity. If now you're, whether by choice or by force, you're working remotely, and you really do the math, you may find that now you don't have 45 minutes, an hour, hour and a half each way commuting to work, and the tiredness that comes from that and all that. You may find some time and some money that you're saving from not eating out or buying as many clothes or whatever. You may have some resources that a side hustle or whatever you want to call it that you'd been thinking of or putting off might really be possible now, because you've got some time and some money that just fell in your lap by just by circumstance. So don't give up on that idea. I mean, massage that out, work that out, try to make a go of that, even if it's not something that would quickly be your only thing, but just do it, go for it.
Oh, that's great. Whitney?
I think that so before, as COVID happened, I was really getting burnt out in my job. like really burnt out. And it's because it had outgrown me so fast. And because I wasn't actually paying myself in this like creative project to get it, do the heavy lift, I became a little bit resentful of it too, and was holding on to all of my ideas and didn't realize that I could start and delegate them elsewhere and get people to work on this with me. So for now, like going forward, my goals are, or I guess the opportunity that this has presented me is to be able to work with people that I want to work with on this project. And so I've seen like my husband, Kevin, be able to work on different creative projects or just actual like income projects with a great team of people. And I see how pumped he is after that. But for me, when I'm working on a project alone, I'm feeling pumped, but it's only like within myself. And I feel kind of defeated if I can't share that work with somebody. So going forward, this is like, my goals are to work with the people that bring me joy and that are have qualities that I really don't have that I can learn from and use to my advantage to really like build something that is for everybody.
That's awesome. I like that. That's a nice way, I think, to wrap things up in our discussion today. I want to thank everyone for joining. That was a great discussion we were able to have. That'll be it for our show today. Invite you to join us Monday. We're going to take a deep dive into audio and video upgrades, maybe to up your Zoom game, maybe for your team or maybe for your employer, and maybe do some light kind of rig tear down, see where could be improvements made. How does it really look? How does it really sound to others? So we invite you to join us for that. Feel free, if you'd like to be a part of that conversation, that would be great. We'd love to have you. Our pre-show starts an hour early at 11 a.m. Pacific time. So join us by 11:45. Raise your blue Zoom hand to be a panelist, and we'll put you on the panel. All people, all experience levels are welcome. The only thing that you need is good audio, good video, good internet, and good energy. So we appreciate that. And appreciate again. Thanks again, everyone, for coming, and I hope you all have a good day.